Danielle Carter is my name. I'm 35 and live in Portland. For the majority of my young life, I went to great lengths to support my family. I'm the type of person who is always on time, responds to birthday wishes even when nobody remembers mine, and will drop everything to take a family member to the hospital. I'm not loud and was never considered the special child. I was simply the one in the background who did everything to hold the family together, but no one ever noticed. Last spring, my younger sister Tessa had her engagement party at an upscale rooftop restaurant in downtown Seattle. My mom called me with a voice that was gentle and sweet, the one she used only when she needed a favor. "Sweetheart, I know this is last minute, but would you mind helping with the deposit for the party? Tessa's under a lot of stress," she said. As usual, I agreed. I called the venue, chose the date, paid the deposit, helped with decorations, and even designed personalized cards with their names engraved. I held on to the faint hope that maybe this time would be different, that I would finally be seen as a true part of the family. That night, I arrived at the restaurant on time, dressed in a new suit and holding a glass of champagne and a small gift. Tessa saw me, offered a half smile, and pointed to a folding chair, awkwardly placed next to a trash can. In a tone as casual as discussing the weather, she said, "Oh, this table is for family only. Can you sit over there, please?" I froze, thinking she was joking, but no one laughed. Nobody intervened. My mother looked away, and my father clinked his glass as if I didn't exist. So, I quietly took my seat on the fringes of a party that I had helped create. 2 hours passed. No one asked if I had eaten or even glanced in my direction. Then the bill arrived, over $3,000, and every eye in the room turned to me. But this time, I didn't reach for my wallet. I didn't smile and accept it. I didn't say, "It's okay." I stood up and finally spoke the words I should have said years ago. What I said next cancelled the wedding, shattered my family, and set me free from a belief I had held for 2 decades, that I wasn't worthy of freedom. I am the elder of 2 sisters in a family from Portland. We were never financially poor, but affection was given out in strange ways. My mom, a former art teacher, used to say things like, "Every child is a unique color in the family's painting, but if someone were to view us from the outside, they'd likely see me as the pale, blank background, and Tessa as the vibrant central hue." My dad, an electrical engineer, retired early after a stroke when I was 28. I can't count how many times I left work to take him to appointments, handle insurance, or sign bank documents since his right hand was no longer functional. Each time, my mother would simply nod and say, "You're really something." If it had been Tessa, she would have been crying all morning. Tessa was always the favorite. Even though it was never stated aloud, I felt it in the way my mom gently ran her fingers through Tessa's hair. After every mess she made, and in the way my dad's brows would furrow with frustration whenever I suggested that Tessa should take responsibility for herself. When Tessa failed her first year of college, due to her obsession with an Instagram healing crystal startup, I was the one who paid off her credit card debt. When she broke up with her 3rd boyfriend in under 2 years and ran away for almost a month, I drove 6 hours to Spokane to pick her up, wrap her in a blanket, make her ginger tea, and sit with her in silence while she cried. I never wanted gratitude. I just longed for recognition. I wished my parents would say, "If it weren't for you, this family would have fallen apart just once." Instead, at every family gathering, I was assigned the side dishes, cleanup, and the folding chair by the kitchen. Meanwhile, Tessa was always at the center of the table, introduced as the family's proud artist. Even though she had only sold a few paintings on Etsy, I remember a Thanksgiving 2 years ago. I brought an apple tart I baked using my grandma's recipe, one my dad used to love. But when I placed it on the table, my mom barely looked at it before gently putting down a tray of store-bought pastries from Tessa's favorite bakery. She announced to everyone, "This is the dessert Tess used to ask for as a child. It brings back memories." Just like that, no one touched the tart I had made. I sat at the end of the table, smiling as I cut myself a slice and repeating, "It's okay," as I always did. But deep down, I knew the truth. I didn't truly belong in the same way Tessa was embraced. Still, I kept showing up. I brought Mum a birthday gift every year. I was the only one who called Dad every Monday to check on his blood pressure because I believed that if I was just patient enough, gave enough, and did enough, I would eventually be seen as part of it all. News of Tessa's engagement came not from an excited phone call from her, but from a brief message in the family group chat. "Hey fam, Logan proposed at Puget Sound yesterday." That was all. There was no personal message or invitation to share in their happiness. I typed a few words of congratulations, then erased them, and finally just sent a heart emoji. It wasn't because I wasn't happy for her, but because I was accustomed to never being one of the first to know. A few days later, my mom called. "Danielle," she said, her voice sweet and cautious, as if she had rehearsed it. "We're holding an engagement dinner for Tessa and Logan at a rooftop place in Seattle. It's not a huge crowd, just about 20 people, but it's very elegant. Logan chose it because his parents love open spaces and sunsets." Before I could even respond, she added, "The only thing is, the reservation requires an early deposit. Could you cover it for now? Just a few hundred, honey. I'll pay you back later." I held the phone in silence, knowing "I'll pay you back" actually meant you'll never see that money again. But I said yes, as I always did. I called the restaurant, reserved a table for 20, selected a sample menu, and even paid up front for the floral arrangements because my mum insisted we can't use fake flowers. They'll look awful in photos. I forwarded the confirmation email to my mom and Tessa. No one replied. I kept telling myself, "Don't take it personally. This is for family." But the warning signs kept appearing, quiet and steady, like the ticking of a bomb. I was casually excluded from a conversation between my mum and Tessa. They had created a new group chat called Magic Engagement. I only found out because my mom accidentally sent me a photo from it and then quickly messaged, "Oh, you don't need to worry about that, sweetie." I scrolled down and saw the seating chart design. The main table included my parents, Logan and his family, and a few of Tessa's closest friends. My name was nowhere on it. At that point, I didn't even know what to feel. Sadness, anger, or just the familiar sensation of being invisible. The day before the party, my mom called again, asking me to pick up the floral arrangement from a high-end florist downtown. "Tessa's swamped. Can you do it since you're already out and about?" I had already finished work, and it was pouring rain, but I agreed anyway. I waited for an hour at the shop due to a mix-up with the order, then personally drove the $4,000 bouquet to the venue. No one thanked me. When I finally got home, soaked to the bone, I saw a message from Tessa in that same group chat, once again accidentally forwarded by my moms. "Everything's finally perfect. Only the people who really matter will be at the main table." I stared at that sentence over and over. The people who really matter. I no longer needed to ask any questions. I quietly turned off my phone, deleted the message, and went into the bathroom. Under the hot water, I asked myself a question I had never dared to speak aloud. If I disappeared from their lives, would anyone notice the empty space? Still, I decided to go to the party. Not because I hoped anything would change, but because I wanted to confront the truth. For the first time, I no longer wanted to lie to myself by thinking they had simply forgotten or that it wasn't intentional. I had tolerated invisibility for long enough. Now, I wanted to see how raw it truly was. I arrived right on time at 7:00 p.m. on a windy rooftop in downtown Seattle. The city lights made everything look like a perfect painting. Everything except for my place in it. I wore a classic, elegant, deep navy suit. My hair was softly curled. My makeup was perfectly done, and I carried a bottle of Veuve Clicquot, Tessa's favorite, and a silver embossed card with her and Logan's names. As I walked in, my heart beat in the same familiar rhythm it always did when I attended a family milestone. I smiled at the hostess, gave my name, and was directed toward the private dining area. There they were. My mom, my dad, Tessa, Logan, Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore, Logan's parents, and a mix of familiar and unfamiliar faces. Everyone looked radiant. The party had already started. Soft music played, candles flickered, and glasses clinked. I walked toward them slowly, expecting at least a nod, a smile, "Hey, you're here." But Tessa turned, gave me a small smile, and gestured to the right with a quick tilt of her head. "This table's for family only, sis, but there's a seat over there," she said, her voice light and casual, as if she were quoting the price of a wedding cake. I followed her gaze. It was a small round folding table, draped in a thin white cloth, set near the trash can. The chair was a cheap black plastic one, unlike the velvet-lined wooden chairs at the main table. I honestly thought she was joking. I stood there, waiting for someone to laugh, for my mom to frown and scold her, for my dad to offer his seat, or for Logan to step in and smooth things over. But nothing happened. My mom stared into her wine glass. My dad shrugged. Logan gave a polite, empty smile and a small nod. No one looked at me directly. I heard a quiet chuckle from one of Tessa's friends. It might not have had anything to do with me, but in that moment, it felt like a knife slicing through the tired, old wallpaper of my long-held silence. I said nothing. I walked to the plastic chair, set the champagne bottle on the floor, and sat. I didn't take off my coat. I didn't eat or drink. I just sat exactly where they had placed me, on the margins. 2 hours passed. No one asked me what I wanted to eat. No one even glanced in my direction. I heard Tessa raise her glass to thank the dearest people who have always stood by me. I saw my mother wipe away a tear as Logan spoke of having a wonderful family to build a future with. Something inside me broke, but it wasn't pain. It was a sense of release. Then the bill arrived. The server approached the main table respectfully, bowing slightly. Tonight's total is 3,082 zauers. Shall I charge it to the card used for the deposit? Tessa looked up and pointed in my direction. She'll cover it. I stood up slowly and looked the server in the eye. My voice was steadier than it had ever been. I didn't eat. I didn't drink. I wasn't allowed at the table. I'm not family. Don't hand me the bill. The air became still. Tessa's face turned red. My mother's mouth opened as if to speak, but no words came out. The server hesitated, glancing back at me. But you're the one who made the reservation. I made the reservation, called the venue, picked the flowers, adjusted the menu, and even fetched the bouquet myself in the pouring rain. But I was seated at the side table, next to the trash. That spot tells you everything you need to know about who I am to them. Not a member, just a tool. So no, I'm not responsible for the bill. I picked up the unopened champagne, slipped my coat back on, and pointed to the plastic table. Then I turned and walked away. I don't remember their reactions, and I didn't care anymore. I didn't feel anger or cry. I just knew that I had finally stood up from the seat I had unknowingly occupied my entire life. The nameless, voiceless chair. The only thought in my head as I walked down the stairs was, if this is how they treat someone who shares their blood, then who do they actually consider family? I got home just before 11 p.m., still in my wrinkled suit, holding the unopened bottle of champagne, my hair tousled, and my eyes fixed on the pavement the entire drive because I was too scared to stop and let the pain swelling in my chest fully take hold. I didn't turn on the lights. I just sat silently on the couch. The quiet was so foreign compared to the laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the soft piano music from the party. It felt unreal. My phone began to buzz. The first message was from my mom. Danielle, what on earth were you thinking? Do you have any idea how much you embarrassed the whole family? A minute later, a text from Tessa. You seriously ruined everything. In front of Logan's family. In front of his parents. I can't believe you. I read them, but didn't reply. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I knew they would only respond with justifications, blame, or silence. No one asked why I reacted the way I did. No one asked if I was okay. No one wondered why the person who had always remained quiet had finally chosen to walk away from a party she had helped put together. They didn't actually care. The next morning, I woke up to 2 missed calls from Logan and an email from an unknown sender. I hoped, just maybe, it would be an apology, but it was the final invoice from the restaurant manager, confirming they still hadn't received the remaining payment. I stared at the number, over $3,000, then deleted the email. It wasn't my responsibility to pay. Later that afternoon, I heard that Logan had a very tense conversation with his father. One of Logan's friends, who used to be close with Tessa, texted me, Mr. Whitmore, found out you paid the deposit, arranged the flowers, organized the whole thing, and was seated next to a trash bin. He was furious. I didn't know what to feel. Revenge. Satisfaction. Honestly, I just felt empty. In the family group chat, which was usually flooded with congratulations, party photos, and pictures of Tessa showing off her diamond ring, there was silence. Not a single new message. I knew that in their eyes, I had become the difficult one, the one who dared to break the perfect facade they had worked so hard to maintain, the image of a loving, supportive family. But the truth was, it had only ever been love for the one who cried the loudest and support for the one who caused the most trouble. And I was the one in the background, quiet, until I wasn't. That's what scared them. I didn't turn on the TV or play music. I just lay there in the dark, holding that unopened bottle of champagne. The only thought in my mind was, did I do the right thing, or did I just lose everything because I dared to ask for respect? My healing didn't start with a grand statement. There was no dramatic social media post declaring a new me or a soul-searching trip to Bali. It began with small, simple actions I hadn't done for myself in over 20 years. I removed the family group chat from my favorites. I unfollowed Tessa on Instagram. I booked my first ever therapy session, not because someone told me to or as a way to de-stress, but because I needed to understand how long I had been living as a shadow. Then, one day, I received a call from an unknown number. The woman on the line had a slow, low, and polite voice. Hello, Miss Carter. This is Brooke Whitmore, Logan's mother. I paused for a few seconds. Hello. I hope I'm not disturbing you. I just wanted to ask a few things. I heard you were the one who organized the engagement party. I didn't answer right away, but then I told her the truth. Without exaggeration or drama, I explained that I had paid the deposit, made the calls, brought the flowers, was not offered a seat or served food, and was then handed the bill as if it were expected. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and all she said was, "Thank you for being honest." A week later, I heard that Tessa had moved out of Logan's apartment. The wedding was postponed indefinitely. A few days after that, I opened an old joint bank account I had set up with Tessa, the one she used for Netflix, Uber, and Instacart. There was still a few $1,000s in it that I had deposited for convenience, and she had never paid me back. I withdrew the remaining balance and closed the account. It wasn't out of anger. It was simply because enough was enough. I booked a solo trip to Europe, a trip I had planned 4 years earlier, but cancelled when my mom called to say my dad had been rushed to the hospital. This time, no one called, and I didn't need a reason to go. In Florence, I wandered through the square at twilight with a glass of red wine in hand, listening to a violinist play an unfamiliar melody. No one there knew I was Tessa's sister. No one expected me to be the good one, the strong one, or the sacrificial one. I was just Danielle, a 35-year-old woman, living for herself for the very first time. On the plane back to Portland, I typed a few lines into my journal. I don't need to be forgiven. I need to be understood. And if no one else is willing to do that, then I'll be the first to do it for myself. When I got home, something felt different. My tiny apartment, which had always felt like a pit stop for anyone who called me in a crisis, now had a completely different energy. Peace. This wasn't because the phone had stopped ringing, but because I had finally broken the connection that tied my self-worth to being useful. I no longer wanted to be a shoulder to lean on, only when things fell apart. I wanted to be a person with boundaries, with a life of her own, and with the right to say no. I wasn't expecting her to show up. That afternoon, I had just returned from therapy and was making a cup of tea when the doorbell rang. I walked over, assuming it was a late grocery delivery, but I saw my mother standing there. She was wearing an old grey knit cardigan and holding a box of blueberry tarts, the same kind I had made that Thanksgiving that no one touched. She looked tired, and there was a hesitation in her eyes that was not pride or defensiveness. It was humility. "Do you have a moment?" my mother asked, her voice barely audible. "I just wanted to talk for a bit. I don't know what made me open the door." She stepped inside and sat at the dining table, as if nothing had ever broken between us, although her arms remained wrapped around the box of tarts, as if she were holding on to a mistake she didn't know how to properly put down. "I'm not here to make excuses," she said the moment I sat across from her. "I didn't come to defend Tessa or to tell you to let it go. I know I was wrong." I didn't respond. I just looked at her. She took a deep breath. "From the time you were little, you were always the easy one, never a bother. You did your homework on your own, packed your own bags, cooked your own meals. You did everything before anyone had to ask. And I thought you were fine, that you didn't need anything more." I stayed quiet, listening, not because I was ready to forgive, but because for once, I wanted to hear her speak without the word but. Not because there was nothing to see, but because I didn't want to look. "Seeing you quietly pushed aside, still smiling through it, it made me feel awful. And instead of facing that, I chose to ignore it, to keep believing everything was fine." I set my teacup down. "And you think an apology is enough to undo 20 years of that?" She lowered her eyes. "No, I know it's not. Nothing can undo it." A long silence stretched between us. I thought it might end the conversation, but then I looked at her, the woman who had fiercely defended my sister from every scrape and bruise, yet had never once spoken up when I was quietly breaking apart. I asked slowly, "Did it ever cross your mind that I wanted to be seen as part of the family too? Not the shadow in the background, not the wallet, not the backup plan, Just a daughter like Tessa. My mother looked up at me, and she didn't respond. Her eyes were red-rimmed. Her arms still wrapped around that box of tarts like a shield, and her lips trembled with words on the verge of forming. But in the end, nothing came out. I understood. Some people aren't cruel. They're just cowardly, and sometimes cowardice is what hurts us the most. She stood up, placed the box on the table. If you don't want to keep it, I understand. I didn't touch it. I didn't reject it. I didn't stop her. She walked out without looking back. I stared at the box. Part of me wanted to throw it in the trash, just as I had been placed next to one that night at the party. But I simply sat there. For the first time, I didn't feel responsible for fixing anyone else's pain. I wasn't waiting for an apology anymore. My mother had come with a tart, and words I had longed to hear my entire life. But what she left unsaid was louder than anything she managed to say. I wasn't angry anymore, but I didn't believe her either. A few days later, my phone lit up with a call from Tessa. I watched the screen, 20 seconds, 30, and eventually let it go to voicemail. An hour later, she texted, "Sis, I really want to talk. I've been thinking a lot. There's so much I didn't see." I didn't reply. I no longer blamed Tessa. I just no longer carried the burden of healing what others refused to acknowledge. I opened my laptop and began typing an email, not just to her, but to the entire family group chat, the same thread where for years I was always the first to respond, organize, and suggest a get-together. The message was only a few lines. "Hi, everyone. I'm writing this not to cause conflict, but to make one thing clear. I will no longer play a role I didn't choose for myself. I'm no longer the emergency fund, no longer the silent hand behind the party without a seat, no longer the one who quietly takes the blame. If family only has space for those who fit the part, then I'll build a different table, one where everyone is heard and respected. No need to reply. This isn't an invitation to debate. Danielle." I hit send. What I felt wasn't relief. It was clarity. My hands didn't shake. I wasn't afraid of backlash. I just knew that for the first time, I had done something purely for myself, not for peacekeeping, not for appearances, and not because the eldest child should always be the understanding. That evening, I opened my inbox. There was an email from Logan, Tessa's almost fiancé. "Danielle, I'm sorry I stayed quiet that night. I should have spoken up. I saw everything, and I didn't know what to do." I read it and replied, "Silence is a choice too, Logan." That was it. I hit send. The reply wasn't meant to change him. It was for me to finally hear myself speak the truth aloud. Silence had been the cage I lived in for decades. Now, I knew I could step out. A month after sending that final email, I received an envelope in the mail. My mother's handwriting was familiar, slightly slanted to the left, as if the hand that wrote it was still hesitant. Inside was an invitation to Thanksgiving. No explanations, no apologies, just one handwritten line. "Only if you feel ready." I placed the card on the table, stared at it for a long time, and then didn't open it again. That night, I opened the bottle of champagne I had brought to the engagement party, the one that had sat in my wine rack untouched ever since. I poured myself a glass, stepped onto the balcony of my small apartment, and looked out at the glittering city. There was no toast, no clinking glasses, but I knew I was celebrating something real. I was celebrating myself. It was no longer the silence of endurance. It was the silence of freedom. I opened my laptop and logged into my personal blog, the space where I had been journaling quietly each month as a form of healing. I changed the name of the site to The Second Seat, a name that came to me during a sleepless night as I remembered exactly where I had sat at that party. But now it no longer symbolized exclusion. It marked the beginning of a new kind of table, one where I choose who gets a seat, and I am the first to arrive. I wrote, I no longer sit beside the trash. I no longer wait to be invited to the main table. I've built my own table, not glamorous, not lit by golden candles, but with room for kindness, truth, and respect. And if you've ever sat at the side seat, held your fork without being served, and given your all without being seen, I want you to know you are not alone. You deserve a seat at the center, where your voice rings clear. I hit publish, not to make noise, but to find closure for myself. I don't know if I'll go to Thanksgiving dinner with my family this year, but I do know this. If I go, it won't be to be accepted. It will be to decide whether the connection is still one I want to keep. Because forgiveness doesn't always come after an apology. Sometimes it comes when we untie ourselves from old expectations and pain and simply say, enough. And you know what? It really is enough. What about you? Have you ever had to stand up for yourself, even if it meant walking away from your family? Have you ever been labeled the strong one, as if that meant you didn't need care? Share your story in the comments. And if you've ever had to reclaim your voice in your own family, like, share, and subscribe, because everyone deserves a seat, not at the edge of the table, but right at the center.